Hi folks, this is Sam, and this is the way I see the first student sample from this week. As many of you have said on the discussion boards, this is really the least successful of the essays we've got, in large part because of a general lack of organization and a problem with the thesis statements throughout. Here we have, is it worth it to achieve a higher degree? Sometimes these pronouns without clear references, without clear antecedents is what we call them in the English world, are problematic. Right away, I'm beginning to be concerned there might be some language. And that holds up when we look at words like streamline, which is one word, and across, which is misused here. The real challenge, I mean, those are obviously problems, but the real challenge is this essay does not have a thesis. It looks like the writer might be moving into a second thesis or a second paragraph of introduction here, because we sort of background in general in the first paragraph, and then the author begins to advance his ideas in the second paragraph. But still, we never really get any kind of thesis in an introductory paragraph. The other real challenge with this is that the sources dominate this essay, and they dominate this paragraph. This is one example here, where all this is from sources and only the unhighlighted material is from the author. Really, you want as much of your ideas as there are from sources. In this, I guess, fourth paragraph, we have a fairly short paragraph. There's really no contextualization from the author. He's not really telling you why this information is important. There's nothing that says you should go to college because you're going to earn more money. It's pretty simple to get those claims into the essay. Here we have another large chunk of data from sources. Useful, compelling, interesting. A lot of folks said when we talked about argument at first that facts and statistics, they were the most important thing. But here we see lots of facts and statistics without the author integrating them into his own argument. And that's where they become problematic. It's really only this part that is from the author. Again, another short paragraph here at the end of the paper. It looks like we've got two conclusions. We've got to summarize, which often summarizes and presents concluding material. And then we have in conclusion, which kind of does the same thing. So it's difficult to see how this paragraph is functioning in the essay. Okay. Moving on to the second essay. Now this is the same writer, so we're going to be forced with the same kind of challenges. It does look like there might be a thesis here. Students struggle with ailing health issues, stress-related depression, and relocating to be able to attend college. So then the question means, the simple answer is no. It's not worth it to go to higher education because of these reasons. The reader from this is expecting a first paragraph on ailing health issues. If we move down here, what we're really talking about is jobs and money and financial aid, which is different. Again, a heavy reliance on sources without integrating that material. Some folks have talked about the sources and how useful and or useless they may be. Cliff Notes, not the best source, folks. I think this is a random Google search. You got to get out of Google. You got to get into the library databases. Here we've got continuing stress, right? Which again highlights some of that language from the thesis, but it's not. This paragraph, it's not really clear that we're talking about stress. We don't get to stress until we get down into the middle. Sometimes you hear me talking about burying a topic sentence in the middle of a paragraph. That's what this author has done here. So we've got to summarize, and then we've got in conclusion again. Those might as well go into the same paragraph. So there's some real challenges with this essay, including the focus, the organization, and the development in the author's own argumentation to make sense. Hi folks, this is Sam again with essay number 2 from the debate essay samples. This one is definitely better than the previous one, but there are some real challenges to it, in part because of the author's belief system that underlies it, and I'll explain that as I go along. Folks, for me, it's really hard to find a thesis that highlights the things that are coming next in the essay. It looks like, and we'll see this in the second essay, that the author has a kind of cloud thesis, is what I call these, where we have part of the thesis here, this sort of new caste system. We have a question here, the rhetorical question. I'll discourage you from using that quite frequently. And then we have another downfall. So what we've got is really half of the introduction serving as the thesis statement, and then something here at the end, which is a sort of summary main idea. It doesn't tell us, it tells us what, but it doesn't tell us why. And the why is an important part of this. Here we have a similar language, genetic division, but in this paragraph we have many negative repercussions. Folks, I'm going to look for one idea in one paragraph. The challenge with this sort of many ideas in a single paragraph is that each of them becomes underdeveloped. Here we have job being passed over for promotions, few seconds to make an impression, and he goes on to say these things are going to happen, and then these things are going to happen from that. A new view of race, and then he goes on to say we're going to have more racially motivated hate crimes. Now, folks, that I think gets close to a slippery slope. There's really no evidence to prove that people are going to be passed over by promotions. This author believes this, and I think he sees no reason to include data, statistics, facts, information, logic, reasoning to help the audience see that as well. Here again, in this next paragraph, I think is a general supposition. It would only be a matter of time before some well-meaning think tank figures out how to target any number of genes, and the technology is commandeered by their benefactors. Folks, this sounds to me like science fiction. I'm not saying it's not true, but we have a well-meaning think tank, and we have benefactors, and then we're talking about people who were made genetically sterile because of genetic manipulation. That's kind of out there, in my opinion. And there's no data. It's way, way beyond the realm of argumentation here. Sorry about that. Here we have sort of more conclusion to the material. I'm running out of time here, so I'm going to move down to the second essay. The second essay is actually a better essay. There is still a cloud thesis, but there's genetic therapy to be rehabilitated, be prepared with defenses at the genetic level. He doesn't really talk about this. Civilization, as demonstrated, is moving. We need to capitalize on the development of engineering. He doesn't really talk about that. But here we have physical, mental dysfunctions could be removed. That's exactly what he's talking about in this first paragraph, although he doesn't quite use that language. He's got some statistics to back it up, and then he comes back and makes the argument here himself. That's good paragraph structure. We are talking about deadly diseases threatening here. That's exactly what he talks about in this paragraph. And then the third paragraph, I think we're talking about diseases in the next paragraph as well. Diseases that had no cure. Okay. This is more about disease. I think he's working to get to page length at this point. And then he says, our science is advancing, so our technology must advance too. The second essay is a better essay. The first essay is clearly what the author believes here because of the broad claims with unsupported reasoning. And that makes this an unbalanced essay and very problematic. Stay away from the cloud thesis, work for rigid structure, and try to stay away from broad claims without support. Hi folks, here we are with sample 3. Folks, I gotta say that this is not a super fantastic essay either. It seems like the should question here is, should abstinence-only programs be the only ones taught in schools? This seems like that central question. The idea here is that with this essay is that you should be able to say yes, because, reason A, reason B, reason C. And for me, that's hard to find in this essay. Here we have supporters argue, provides foundation for personal responsibility and marital commitment. That seems like a reason. Preventing teen pregnancy, eliminating STDs, and reducing psychological and emotional trauma. Those seem like reasons. If the writer can take those three things, put them into a thesis statement, then we've got something. But it's like we've got two introductions here, and this is what most academics will take to be a thesis statement, whatever comes at the end of the first paragraph. And that's challenging today in this essay. Here the author moves to source material and ends the paragraph with source material. That makes it a real challenge. In this paragraph, maybe we have another thesis. Originally when I read this essay, I thought this is what the thesis was. They'll be able to communicate. Abstinence only should be taught because it will teach students to communicate what they want, give them the tools to make that decision, and learn how to ask questions about natural sexual urges. Great, that's a perfectly reasonable thesis. But the challenge is that the rest of the essay doesn't follow that. The author again leads with sources here, as in some of the other samples. Always, always, always lead with your claim. It doesn't have to be first necessarily, but man, it ought to be in the first three for sure. It seems like the author is sort of arguing with herself in this essay in some ways, and that makes it really hard to see a central focus. Again, here the author leads with evidence. Okay, it doesn't say abstinence only should be taught because it will reduce sexually transmitted diseases and they are a problem. That's a claim. This, as we get here at the beginning of this paragraph, is evidence. And the readers don't know what that means if you don't tell them what that means, what these facts and statistics mean. Okay. And I gotta move on. I'm running out of time here. Same challenge largely with the second essay in this assignment. It seems like there might be a thesis statement somewhere in here. Those who do not agree with abstinence only claim teenagers, one, teenager will have sex. Two, it's better for them to be equipped with solid educational, next page, information. Okay. Three, teens will be able to limit the spread of STDs and prevent unplanned pregnancies. Okay, then we're getting to be a thesis. It's that kind of cloud thesis from that previous essay too. It's hard to see a connection between this idea and the ideas that have come before. So now, at least here, we've got a claim, right? The author is saying something. And then the author moves to source material to back that claim up. That's great. That's the kind of structure we're looking for. But I'd point out that all of this material comes from the source. And in this paragraph, only the claim is coming from the author. Only this material is coming from the author. That's a problematic balance between the sources. Here in the next paragraph, we've got opposing views. Well, I'm not sure which side is opposing which side and who, because they're talking back and forth to each other. It's really simplest with this assignment if you make the argument. We should have contraceptions, we should have abstinence only, we should not have abstinence only because, instead of talking about supporters and detractors and opposers and whatever. This author does get into some of her own argumentation through here, but really that's only in the conclusion of the material. And so even with this one, it's difficult to see a particular thesis. It's difficult to find the relationship between the body of the essay and the material in the thesis.